Greetings, Dan Halligan from Kayenta Games, and this is a critically important video. So if you're like me, and sometimes I'll tune out of a video if it doesn't capture my attention right out of the gate, I'm trying to capture your attention. There was an omission from the upstairs downstairs expansion box, and this video is one step in correcting that omission. It's about integrating the different components that are inside with the base game, depending on which game combination you have. At the end of this video, I'm going to go ahead and explain exactly what happened, but I'm not going to do that now because I want those of you who are getting this product to be able to come to this video and immediately get instructions on what to do with each and every component inside. So here we have a shrink wrap version just like the one you're going to get. So I'm starting with a sealed shrink wrap version, and we're going to open it and we're going to process what's inside, and I'm going to explain where everything goes and why everything is as it is. Okay, got that out. Lifting the box. See exactly what shows up. These are large courtship cards. These courtship cards were designed as part of a stretch goal to give to those Obsession First Edition players who had, I make some jokes and fun, but really we're not keen on the small courtship cards. These are courtship cards, as you can see, that are the same size as the objective cards. So what do you do with these courtship cards? They are identical to the courtship cards that are located in the Obsession second printing box. They're identical. Courtship cards contain two different types of cards. A victory point card, you can see it on top here. There's 30 of those. And a theme card, you can see a back of a theme card here. There are 10 of those. It's identical to the small deck that's in the second printing of Obsession. You can choose to keep one, get rid of the other, they're interchangeable, just different sizes. If you want to keep both because they're nice components, you can do that. They don't work together. One or the other is used on the round track. Those are courtship cards that are placed out for gameplay. So you just pick your choice. If you have the first edition of Obsession, the theme cards are identical besides the fact that the size is different. But the courtship cards are different. When I come on with the PDF online reference, I will actually detail the differences explicitly, but mainly the 6, 7, and 8 victory point cards that were standalone victory point cards without favors were removed, and these are all victory point cards with a favor ranging from 3 victory points to 5 victory points. There was also some very slight rebalancing where a couple of the favors were adjusted. So if you are keen, you've got the original, and you are keen on using the new balanced victory point cards, you would need to use this deck and not the deck that was in the first edition of Obsession. So that's the courtship cards. The objective cards. These objective cards are different than the objective cards that are in the second edition of Obsession. The second edition of Obsession does not, of course, have upstairs downstairs servants, and you can see here that there are upstairs downstairs servants reflected in this deck because it's in the upstairs downstairs expansion where the new servants are introduced. I've only so far found 2 very small mistakes in the actual components outside the fact that I left out the instructions for the integration. And that is that I forgot to put a unique identifier, say a U, somewhere on this card so that you could keep the card. If the cards got mixed, you could separate them out. That will be part of the online reference. If you have the second edition of Obsession and you have upstairs downstairs, you probably want to retain the second edition Obsession cards, keeping those 2 decks separate. Because if you ever play the game without the upstairs downstairs servants, you can't use these cards. If you're always going to play the game with the upstairs, downstairs servants, then you can go ahead and use these as your sole objective card deck. That's your objective cards. No special instructions are required for this. It does allow for up to 6 players rather than the other one which allowed for 4 players. It also references that milestones will be scored along with the objective cards in this section of the score pad. This main deck here contains all the Gentry cards associated with the upstairs, downstairs expansion. It also contains player aids which are specific to upstairs, downstairs. I'm not going to give detailed instructions on the player aids. You'll have to decide, am I playing the game with the upstairs, downstairs servants, in which case you want these player aids? Or am I playing the game without the upstairs, downstairs servants, in which case you can use the aids in either the first edition or second edition of Obsession. All the Gentry cards in here can be fully integrated. They don't have any special instructions associated with them. This deck contains Family Howard, and it contains prestige and casual guests that will enable the higher player counts and add a lot of variety and did a little bit of rebalancing, but these can be fully integrated. There's no special rules for these. These become part of your casual and prestige guest decks. These are the promo cards. The promo cards were designed by backers, by users of the first edition of the game. These cards will be discussed in a separate video. They probably should not be integrated into your casual and mostly prestige guest decks because these cards break a lot of rules. They're fun. You're gonna have a good time with them, but you are not going to want to just throw them willy-nilly into both decks. It'll break the game. Be a separate video on these. These are promotional cards. They have not been heavily play tested, and the play testing that I've done and my group has done show that they are uber powerful. But 1 or 2 or 3 of these agreed on by all players, an excellent addition to most games. These are the upstairs, downstairs servants and the necessary starting servants, the butler, the housemaid, the footman, valet, and ladies' maids necessary to play up to 6 players. How you integrate them is really up to you. If you want all 6 players in your original box, then those original servants would go in the original box, and you could keep the upstairs, downstairs servants sequestered for when you play with the expansion. I personally would never play the original version of Obsession without the upstairs, downstairs servants ever again. That's my opinion. As I said in my Kickstarter video, this completes the game. It doesn't change the game. But that's up to you to decide. This is a nice, beautiful, I love this bag. In fact, all the servants exactly fit in here from both games. So this is just a storage bag. There's no special instructions there. This is the instruction card for the promotional cards as far as how each of the promotional cards work. That's self-explanatory. I don't know what that bag's doing in there. There's the instructions. We'll set that over there. This is straightforward. This is Family Howard with both their integrated organizer as well as their standalone organizer. I'll make a point here. I'll be making it in other videos. There will be a total of 5 country estate improvement organizers, and there will be 6 family boards. If you play with 5 people, each person has a choice to use a separate organizer depending on the space constraints of your table, or to use the integrated organizer. If you're ever playing with 6 people, and the only official mode endorsed in the rule book for 6 people is cooperative 6, so that would be 3 teams of 2 playing against each other. One person is going to have to use the integral organizer. I'm going to come back to this because I'm going to want to move the box, so I'm going to set that up there. This is the round track that comes in the upstairs, downstairs expansion. This side, which is the extended play side, is specifically provided for anyone who has the first edition of Obsession. There are a couple differences between this and the extended play side and the first edition of Obsession. Most prominently is the position of the national holiday, and that's the reason this is included. In the first edition of Obsession, the national holiday is late in the extended play game, and it ceases to be useful because by that time of a long game, everybody has a 6 reputation or better. And so it no longer stood out as a special strategic event. And so it's been moved, credit to John Weber, to this position where it becomes uber important in the success in the game. The Builders Market Reserve is the new way that we manage our supply board. For first edition Obsession owners, they don't have to change how they manage the market if they're comfortable with it. And we will get into this when we talk about this extension in the Builders Market Reserve. So this does not have to be used. The main reason for first edition owners that want to maintain how they operate the market is to get the position of the national holiday in a good spot. The backside is for the new game modes, Solo Estate Challenge and Tableau Obsession. I'm not going to explain those here. There are playthroughs to see them. There will be additional playthroughs, but this is essential and should be kept with your collection. Now we have our punch boards. I'm going to go ahead and take those gently out. Before we get into the punch boards, I'm going to set these aside here. When I chose to improve the builder's market and make a change to how the market operated, I felt that it was incumbent upon me to make sure that first edition owners who are keeping their first edition had the capability to elegantly implement the new market rules. This is an original board. The change in the original board to add the market reserve could be done without making any special accommodations. What the implementation of the Builders Market Reserve does is it deals with the stagnation of the market, and it also deals with making available a pool of inexpensive improvements, which was thematically quite coherent as players started to climb out of their difficult situation with their standing in the county and their low reputation and their general state of impoverishment. So once they were more reputable, once they had money in their pocket, then it makes sense that they would be able to make inexpensive improvements happen quite easily. And that's one thing the reserve does, along with not clogging up the market when we get to the last 2 seasons of the game and we want to see high value improvements in the market. So I'm going to slide this over here. I felt strongly that I owed it to the owners of the first edition to be able to elegantly implement a solution that was pleasing to look at. This game has a lot of aesthetic qualities to it, and I wanted to maintain those qualities. Now comes into play the extension that is in the Upstairs Downstairs expansion. If you have the second edition of the Upstairs Downstairs expansion, you do not need this. The board in the second edition of the Upstairs Downstairs expansion has the market reserve on it. It's a larger board. If you have the first edition and you want this, you can use it. You could also use it without it, and I know I played without it when I didn't have it, because the reserve is just something that you can establish off the board. But to me, I think I owed it to my folks to make sure that we had a good-looking option. So this extension to the board adds the market reserve so that first edition owners have the same aesthetic experience and the same organization as do the second edition owners. Now we get to the 2 punch boards and the 16 improvement tiles and the chits that come along with it. Quite simply, this is not complicated. These chits here are for the 5th and 6th player. The 9-10 chit is intended for one of the new game modes, and that could probably be kept in a separate location or should just be kept with all the chits, depending on your preference. These chits here are intended for claiming milestones. There is one of these boards right here where these chits are used in the Solo Estate Challenge, the backside. These chits, which are the crest of each family, if you're playing with milestones, should be distributed. We had one extra, so I stuck my logo on there. Now I'm going to zoom in. I want to walk through the punch boards and what happens with each and every tile. First of all, you see the start tiles. There's 1 butler's room up top, and then there are 4 down low. These are for 5th and 6th players. There's 5 start tiles on each of the 16 tile punch boards. So 5 tiles from each punch board are for the 5th and the 6th family. So let me grab that there, that there, that there, that there, and that one there. Make sure I'm in focus. So I've taken 10 of the 16 tiles out. Those start tiles are not marked as unique because they're universal. They can apply to any family. I'm going to go back to the top punch board. They can apply to any family. They're just simply integrated with the 5th and 6th player boxes. So if you keep them in the boxes, they would go in the boxes and allow for you to have 6 boxes that contain all the materials for the setup of each family board. So I'm going to set those off screen. We know what happened with those. Secondly, in order to enable 5th and 6th players, we needed more improvement tiles. Now, that's not counting the promotional tiles, which certainly would make up that lack, but it is counting the fact that there's only 1 copy of Prestige Rating 5 tiles in the original game. So we need 2 copies of Prestige Rating 5 tiles in the original game. There are 6 such tiles. And there they are. Came out of that first board. We now have 16 of the 32 tiles with a home. And that home is in the base game. So now the base game has 2 sets of Prestige Rating 5 tiles, just like 4, 3, 2, and 1. Only the Prestige Rating 6 tiles have a scarcity and a unique value. Those I'm going to set over next to the 10 start tiles. What does that leave us with? So on this one here, you're going to see 2 tiles, which are the tiles from the Kickstarter Stretch Goal contest of backer-developed promotional tiles. These tiles are the 2 winning vote getters. From the perspective of the developer, me, they are not overpowered. They're very good tiles. The parish church in particular has a very powerful front side. But when you look at the cost of endowing the living, I believe these tiles can be fully integrated into your tiles in the base game. So like the base game tiles have suites and monuments. This one sort of falls in the category of sort of a special suite monument type tile. It converts to a monument. And this one is just a great useful tile with powerful but not overpowered favors. It is a hybrid tile, so it gives us a 3rd hybrid tile because there's 2 hybrid tiles in the 2nd edition. Those are indicated with a U because they are a product of the upstairs-downstairs expansion development, and those go and get integrated into the game. So now we're getting down to smaller numbers. And here we have the housekeeper's room. Housekeeper's room is a new tile I introduced, which allows the head housemaid to function as a housekeeper or a lady's maid when this tile is owned. There's a separate video that already talks about this. I do want to make a point, and this is one of 2 component errors, albeit I think small ones, the other being the objective cards where I did not put the U on it. One side of this tile, this tile is properly configured here. It's supposed to have 1 victory point. Anybody who has played the game knows that a service tile is the same on both sides. Well, the front side or one side of the tile has 0 victory points. That's not valid. However, the way these tiles are used is they're purchased from the market, placed in the organizer, and they never move from there. So I would, and you know because I did it in the first campaign, if there was a defective component that affected gameplay, I would replace it or I would fix it. In this case, these tiles will function just fine. We just need to put the right side up in the market. So these are upstairs, downstairs tiles. I'm going to go ahead and set them right there. Those are going to be part of the upstairs, downstairs pile we'll talk about. This is a 2nd tile which I developed, which is called the renovated kitchen. And this renovated kitchen is a single tile. It's not a double like the other service tiles. And it's a fascinating tile. Again, there's another video on it. And it is marked uniquely. That goes in our new service stack that we're developing. You know I love service. So if I flash out here, you'll see that I've emptied this punch board. I'm going to set it over here. I'm going to flash back in. At the top of this punch board, you're seeing monuments, and you're saying, what are these monuments? There was an extensive stretch goal discussion that went on in Kickstarter about those folks who feel that the monuments that are in the first and second edition of Obsession, which are both the same, have too elevated a victory point number as far as their impact on courtship. If you're not familiar enough with the game to know what that means, we'll dive into that in other forums. But what these are low victory point monuments that can be integrated into a game and used in courtship for those where that was a concern. And it was a large enough concern from enough people that I decided to go ahead and do this as a stretch goal. I personally like the original configuration, and I know there's people who do as well. But I think this is a nice option. It also excludes a blue service monument because it was felt that with the low value of blue service improvement tiles for victory points, that such an overpowering monument really broke the service courtship. Again, I do like the original configuration because to me, monuments are about the most ostentatious and prestigious expression of your rise in the aristocracy, and I think they should be powerful, but these again are that option. These do not coexist with the ones that are in the original or in the second edition of Obsession. It's an either or. If you like low victory point value monuments, you want to take these and you want to put those into your box and maybe reserve the others. If you like to have both options, keep them separate. They never are used together. If you don't like these at all, just set them aside. So that's what those are. So now we're down to a total of 7 tiles left. Stock Lake is a tile I developed to give a prestige rating 6 tile to the sporting category, which it didn't exist. That gets integrated right into the base game, but I'm going to keep it in our pile here of upstairs, downstairs, unique developed products. The Carriage House is a service tile I developed, which I really, really like, which allows you to break the rule as far as the number of people who are invited to a particular activity. That was a hard and fast rule in the original rule set. Now it is a rule that with the placement of a footman, or a hall boy or an under butler based on their abilities, you can go ahead and break that rule. Wonderful service tile. Putting it in our service tile stack there. So this is a new stack of service tiles that come in the upstairs downstairs expansion, and that's a new improvement tile. The remaining tiles, which are barns and servants' halls, I'm setting this aside because if I flash out, you'll see we're done. These remaining tiles for the barn and the servants' hall are in the game for 2 reasons. The barn had language in the original barn configuration that with the advent of upstairs, downstairs servants would have made it confusing. So I have changed the language, credit to Franco Cagno. I changed the language so that it was not ambiguous. These are here and these are here, which reflect the new rule for using the servants' hall, where a servant must be placed in order to gossip and steal reputation. These 2 are provided solely for those who have the first edition of Obsession and purchase the upstairs downstairs expansion. These replace the tiles that are in the first edition of Obsession, which should be discarded. These are duplicated in the second edition of Obsession. But I have to be cognizant that the upstairs downstairs expansion was purchased by a large number of people who kept their original game, and their original game is fine. But this is not necessary for owners of the second edition of Obsession. So we flash out. We've processed everything in the box. I'll go all the way out. And I don't think there's any more questions associated with what the status is of every component in the upstairs downstairs expansion, but I want to give you an explanation of what happened. And what happened is a bit of advice I would give to any game developers who are considering of getting into the business. So when I developed the game before the Kickstarter last year, I had a pretty complete product and a very ambitious timeline to deliver that product in late February, early March. Obviously, COVID came along and screwed everything up. But at that point, the product was defined, tested, reviewed, given to folks, and so on. What happens that I think is a deadly, dangerous thing in the crowdfunding market is that changes have a ripple effect. And if I had to give advice to any prospective game developers, beware late changes, which is what happens when you're in a crowdfunding project. There's a great energy. The backers are engaged. If you're a smart developer, you're soliciting their input. You're taking that input and tweaking and refining the project. Now you go from being not on the clock and being very able to develop a play-tested and tight product to being on the clock with a lot of changes, and every change has a ripple effect. The ripple effect that caused the integration instructions to be left out of the upstairs-downstairs box is entirely my fault. That set of integration instructions was on the back page of an 8-page rule book, which was part of my upstairs-downstairs product before the campaign. We added so much during the campaign, I had to increase the rule book to 12 pages, and I ran out of space. So I concluded that I would take the instructions for integration off the back of the rule book, which is prime real estate, and I would do a separate sheet which would be placed in the upstairs-downstairs box. I totally forgot that sheet. So much time was spent in writing up the instructions for the new game modes, for the new player counts, for the new materials, that my note to go ahead and create a separate game sheet got shuffled and tucked, and lo and behold, the one thing that's missing from this campaign that I'm actually stunned I didn't catch was this video and that integration sheet. That sheet will be refined and posted online as a PDF, both print friendly and thematically formatted. And I do apologize for that. It's a lesson learned that, you know what, if you're going to crowdfund, you can't put yourself back on the clock after the crowdfunding project. You got to go ahead and do the same play testing, the same taking the finished product and giving it to strangers and say, go to it, and sit there with a pad and watch them struggle. So my apologies. Hopefully this video gets all the people who are grabbing this from their postman and gives them the instructions for integration, and then we will circle back with some online print references in the very near future.